First contact, last mistake. The Trascan Alliance had ruled more than 50 planets for over 400 years, and in all that time, they had never lost a war, never met an enemy they could not defeat, and never feared any species that dared to resist their rule, because they believed that their knowledge of war was perfect and unshakable, something passed down from generation to generation like a sacred weapon. Their fleets were fast, their weapons were advanced, and their commanders had studied every strategy known in the galaxy. So when one of their scout ships discovered a small blue and green planet named Earth on the edge of a quiet solar system, the Council laughed, saying it would be nothing more than a short and easy conquest. From the first scan, the humans looked wild and emotional primitive creatures, still fighting among themselves, still using fossil fuel on some machines, and still arguing over invisible lines drawn on their own planet. And to the proud Trascan Empire, this meant one thing: humans were not a threat, only a potential workforce. So with full confidence and no fear, they sent a light assault, fleets just enough to handle the job quickly, because they believed it would take no more than 2 Earth days to bring the humans to their knees and send a message to other nearby systems that resistance was pointless. But something went wrong almost immediately. The Trascan ships entered Earth's orbit without being challenged, just as they expected. But when they fired their first warning shot at a small military base in a remote region, expecting surrender signals, there was silence for 10 full minutes. Then every single Trascan screen across every ship suddenly went black dot at first. The commanders thought it was a technical glitch. Then the lights dimmed. Then the system passwords were changed by someone speaking English. Then one quiet sentence appeared on every screen, across every ship, in white letters on black. "You started this." That was the first time in years that Commander Vaughn, the leader of the assault fleet, felt something like fear. He ordered the fleet to fall back and regroup on the dark side of Earth's moon. But by the time they arrived, 2 of their smaller ships were already gone. No explosion, no signal, just gone. The soldiers inside were never found. Back on Earth, the humans didn't send a message of peace. They didn't explain anything. They didn't even respond to the initial hail from the Trascans. Instead, they did something the Trascans had never seen before. They simply vanished from view, hiding entire military systems from satellite scans, jamming communication lines, and sending silent probes into Trascan ships without detection. And when the Trascans finally managed to land troops near a quiet desert region, hoping to take control of a communication tower, those troops were ambushed by something terrifying, not by large armies, not by tanks or airships, but by small human teams, moving through the night with such speed and silence that the Trascans barely had time to fight back. It was not just the weapons the humans used, it was how they used them. The humans didn't fight like soldiers, they fought like hunters. They used fire to confuse the Trascan heat sensors, released drones that made animal noises to draw them away, and set traps that targeted only their commanders, removing leadership first. By sunrise, the entire Trascan landing team had either disappeared or been captured. Commander Varen, now panicking, sent out an emergency request for backup and returned to orbit, where he found one of his own ships floating dead, all power lost, with a human message carved into the hull with a laser. "You don't know war." Not yet. Inside that ship, every Trascan crew member was still alive, but every one of them refused to speak, refused to move, their eyes wide, their breathing shallow, as if they had seen something so powerful and silent that it broke their will to fight. Back on their home planet, the Trascan Council demanded answers. They couldn't understand how this primitive species had turned their own tactics against them, had hacked their systems, stolen their tech, and used it without permission. But the truth was simple. Humans had studied war long before they ever reached the stars. They had fought world wars, cold wars, invisible wars. They had lived through centuries of survival, pain, rebellion, betrayal, and sacrificed them. The greatest mistake the Trascans made was thinking humans were weak, just because they looked small on the outside. Because war was not about size or technology. War was about what you're willing to lose and what you're willing to become when someone threatens your home. And as the first human ships finally launched into space, in response not to run, but to hunt, Commander Vaughn whispered to his second-in-command, "We thought they were prey, but they came for us like predators." For 2 days after the failed Trascan assault on Earth, the stars above the planet remained quiet. with no new attacks, no new landings, and no warnings from the human side. And while the Trascan ships hovered just beyond the reach of Earth's weapons, waiting for a human reply or surrender, there was nothing but silence. Commander Vaughn paced the dark metal bridge of his flagship, listening to the quiet hum of failing systems and the uneasy breathing of his crew, who had once believed they were invincible but now kept looking over their shoulders, expecting the shadows to move. "Why don't they speak?" his second-in-command asked. "Why don't they answer? Are they afraid?" But Vaughn knew the answer in his bones. "They are watching," he said, "and they are choosing where to strike next." Because the humans didn't behave like any other enemy the Trascans had faced. They didn't ask for negotiations. They didn't try to defend their planet in the usual way. They had simply vanished off the grid, off the sensors, off the map, and that was far more terrifying than open war. Hours later, just before the third sunrise, the first sign came. A single Trascan ship, a scout vessel with advanced cloaking, failed to check in. The ship's last known position was near Mars, far from Earth's defenses, but close enough to keep watch over human movements in space. Varn sent a second scout. It returned within 20 minutes, but it brought no message. It only broadcast a short video, a dark hallway filled with sparks, broken panels, and the sound of slow, heavy footsteps. Then a human voice, calm and cold, speaking clear Trascan dialect. "You watched us. Now we are watching you." Then silence. No bodies, no blood, no explosions, just emptiness and fear. The second scout was then disabled, mid-broadcast, crashing into one of the moons of Mars. Trask and officers panicked. The Empire sent reinforcements, dozens of ships arriving in Earth's orbit, with glowing weapons and strict orders to crush any resistance, but they didn't get the chance to fire, because the humans struck first, not from the sky, not from Earth, but from inside the fleet. At exactly 3:17 Solar Standard Time, every Trascan ship in orbit began to receive strange signal data packets, hidden inside their own systems, disguised as old Alliance code. And within minutes, things began to fail. Doors stopped opening, lights blinked red, gravity fields reversed. Then, every main screen on every ship turned black, and one word appeared in white, written in English and Trascan at the same time. Now, in that moment, small escape pods launched from Earth, hundreds of them, fast and silent. The Trascans didn't understand at first. Why would humans launch escape pods? Then those pods started landing inside the Trascan fleet. Not bombs, not weapons, people, teams, soldiers, infiltrators. They moved like shadows through the ships, cutting off power, capturing officers, disabling engines without killing a single crew member, because humans didn't need to destroy everything to win. They needed control. By the time the Trascans realized what was happening, 5 of their ships had already been taken without a single explosion. Inside one of the captured ships, a human soldier named Renna moved through the dark with her team, calm and precise, guiding her squad without speaking, using hand signals and short-code whispers, because she had trained her whole life for war, but not the kind of war the galaxy knew. This was the human kind, slow, clever, merciless. She reached the bridge and found the Trascan captain hiding behind his seat, clutching a plasma blade, his face covered in sweat. "Please," he said in broken English, "I am not here to fight." Rena didn't raise her gun. She just looked at him and said, "You came to our world. You started this." The man dropped his weapon. Elsewhere, in the Trascan command ship, alarms echoed as more humans appeared from the shadows, not in full armies, but in small deadly units, slipping past guards, disabling engines, and locking doors behind them. They didn't shout. They didn't panic. They just moved like hunters who already knew where their prey would run. And above Earth, the stars blinked quietly as another fleet, this time human, began to rise from hidden stations on the Moon and Mars. Not large, not flashy, but ready. Commander Vaughn, watching the chaos unfold across his fleet, finally understood what had gone wrong. His people had studied war like it was a science. The humans treated it like an instinct, and now that instinct had been awakened. He turned to his comms officer. "Send a message to the Council," he said, his voice quiet and shaken. "Tell them, Earth is not ready for conquest. Earth is ready for revenge." The Trascan Empire had always believed that war was about control, about numbers, power, and showing the enemy who ruled the Starzan for many years. That belief had worked for them, because they had the biggest fleets, the fastest ships, and the strongest weapons in the galaxy. But now, they had made a mistake. They couldn't undo. They had touched Earth, they had called humans weak, and now, they were learning that humans didn't just fight. They hunted. After the human infiltration of the Trascan fleet in Earth's orbit, panic spread through the outer systems of the Empire, because it was no longer just about losing a battle, it was about something far worse. The humans weren't trying to conquer the Trascans, they were trying to understand them, and then use that understanding like a knife to cut deep without warning. In the weeks that followed, something even stranger began to happen. Trascan outposts, small, remote, and usually forgotten, started going dark. No calls. No signals. No alerts. Just silence. The first was on the edge of the Yaren Belt, a small mining base with 100 soldiers and 2 defense towers. When the Empire sent a team to investigate, they found the place still standing but empty. No bodies. No blood. Just signs of struggle, and symbols on the wall painted in fire-charred black. Remember Earth. The second base, 3 days later, was found buried under its own collapsed mountain. The sensors showed no seismic activity. It wasn't natural. The rock had been cut to fall, with precision only humans could use. The third base wasn't found at all. Only a recording, left floating in a nearby asteroid field. A video, played across Trascan channels. A human, wearing a dark helmet, speaking in calm, clear words. "We do not want your empire. We do not want your planets, but we will not be forgotten. Not again. We were quiet for too long. You should have left us alone." Now, across the galaxy, whispers began to spread, not from the Empire, but from traders, smugglers, neutral, races who had once feared the Trascans and now started telling each other stories about ghost ships with no crew, floating into Trascan space, exploding without a trace after dropping something behind. Sometimes it was a code virus that melted entire defense systems. Sometimes it was just a message. Sometimes it was a name, a human name, because humans had learned everything they needed to from the first attack, and now, they were doing something. The Trascans didn't understand they were testing weaknesses, not to destroy but to send a message, and that message was spreading faster than light. One night, in a distant city, on the Trascan-controlled planet of Varian, a fire broke out in a military supply depot. When the guards arrived, nothing was missing, but a wall had been marked, with strange symbols in Earth language, and beside it were heat signatures of people who had never entered or exited through the gates. They had simply appeared, then vanished, like shadows in smoke. One young Trascan officer, new to war and proud of his training, asked his commander, "How can they strike us if we don't know where they are?" The commander, older and tired, looked at the stars and whispered, "Because they are already here, watching." And he was right. Human forces had spread quietly, not in grand invasions, but in small, invisible threads of action. They moved through old smuggler routes, disguised their signals as mining ships, used hacked Trascon codes to open gatesand when they arrived. They didn't use tanks or lasers. They used fear. Precision. Timing. And silence. Because war, for the Trascans, had always been about the loudest gun. But for humans, war was about becoming invisible until it was too late. On Earth, the people didn't cheer for revenge. They didn't celebrate the attacks. They stayed quiet, watching the news, hearing the reports of missing Trascan fleets, of commanders disappearing without a sound, of planets whispering Earth's name in the dark. They knew this wasn't a war they started, but it was a war they would finish. And on the command deck of Earth's newest ship, the silent Fanga woman named Rena stood with her hands behind her back, watching a map filled with red Trascan lights slowly blink out, one by one. She didn't smile, she didn't speak, she simply nodded to her crew, because they all understood something the galaxy was only just learning. You don't warn a predator, you let it hunt. The Trascan High Council had finally realized that what was happening was not a series of accidents, not a few lost bases, and not just a mistake in judgment. It was a full war, slow and dangerous, being fought by an enemy that was smaller, quieter, and far more intelligent than they had believed. And for the first time in over 4 centuries, the Trascan Empire was afraid. But instead of stepping back, they decided to do what they always did. When fear took hold, they gathered their full strength, summoned their greatest fleets, and planned to show the galaxy that the Empire still ruled the stars with unmatched force. They called it Operation Iron Sky, a full-scale strike meant to erase Earth from the map and burn any planet that supported humans. More than 100 warships were prepared, thousands of soldiers trained for orbital assault. Commanders reviewed maps, battle plans, and intelligence reports, everything designed to hit Earth with so much power that resistance would be impossible. But they didn't realize that every plan, every ship, and every piece of intelligence they used was already compromised, because humans had been watching for months, and they had already set the trap. When the Empire's main fleet jumped into Earth's system, led by Supreme Commander Rothax himself, they expected to find human ships waiting in panic, or hiding in defense formations, or maybe even trying to flee. But there was nothing. No movement. No signals. No orbit patrols. Just Earth, silent and still, floating below them like a soft blue target. Rothax laughed. He gave the order to advance, but just as the ships moved closer, something strange happened. Every long-range sensor suddenly showed false readings. Some ships showed duplicate Earths on the map, others showed moons that weren't there. Then ships began to lose contact with each other, one by one. Confusion filled the command decks. The fleet paused, and that's when the sky broke. Not from Earth, not from ships, but from inside space itself. Dozens of hidden satellites, disguised as space rocks and debris, activated at once, sending out powerful EMP waves tuned not to destroy, but to blind the Trascan fleet. In less than 5 minutes, almost 30 ships lost power. Another 20 were forced to drift away from formation, and then the real strike began, not from the front, but from behind. Human ships, small and fast, hidden on the far side of the moon and in asteroid fields, appeared like ghosts, slipping through blind spots and tearing into the fleet's weak points. But they didn't try to destroy the whole fleet. They didn't need to. They aimed for one thing: command ships. One after another. The leadership vessels of the Trascan fleet were struck with perfect timing, either disabled or boarded by small human teams. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to cut off the head of the fleet. Commander Rothax, still on the main bridge, shouted orders to regroup, but no one answered. His screen showed chaos ships colliding, comes dead crew running in. Just when he tried to activate emergency retreat, the lights on his ship dimmed. A human voice came through his personal comm. Not loud, not angry, just calm. You thought war was about strength. We made you believe that, but war is about control. The feed cut. Then the ship's engines shut down. By the time a small emergency Trascan group managed to retreat, only half the fleet survived, and none of them understood how it happened so fast. Back on Earth, the world was quiet again, not cheering, not celebrating. Because this war was not about pride, it was about survival. Inside a command base hidden under Antarctica, Rina stood beside Earth's defense leaders, reviewing the battle. She didn't look pleased, she looked focused. We won this round, her second said. The Empire won't come back, so I said. But Rina shook her head slowly. They won't stop, she said. Now they're angry. Now they'll send everything. And what do we do? He asked. Rina looked up at the screen, where a map of Trascan-controlled space glowed with red lights. We go first, because humans had shown they could defend. Now, it was time to attack. After the failure of Operation Iron Sky and the destruction of half the Trascan fleet in Earth's orbit, the galaxy expected the humans to sit back, to wait, to hide behind their defenses like so many small species had done before them. But instead, the humans did something no one had imagined. They launched an invasion, not in years, not in months, in days. Within 72 hours of the Trascan retreat, Earth's top commanders approved what they called Project Ghostfire, a coordinated strike into the heart of Trascan space, using stolen codes, disguised ships, and tactics no alien empire had ever seen before. It wasn't about sending large fleets or showing off new weapons. It was about breaking the illusion of Trascan control. And to do that, the humans didn't aim for military bases or capital cities. They went after the system behind the Empire. The first target was a world not known for battle but for information. It was the center of the Trascan communication grid, a quiet, heavily protected planet that connected almost all warships, defense systems, and political broadcasts. It had never been touched by war. Until now. Rina, the same human leader who had led the orbital sabotage, was placed in command of a task force made of only 7 ships disguised as Trascan cargo vessels, each carrying a full infiltration squad, AI drones, and enough hacking equipment to turn the planet dark. They entered Trascan space silently, passing through customs with fake IDs and stolen codes, slipping through space like invisible blades, knowing that if even one of their signals was traced, the entire mission would collapse. They landed without firing a shot, and within minutes, the attack began. It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive. It started with small glitches, lights flickering, doors opening at the wrong time, warning sirens sounding in places where there was no danger, and, while security teams rushed to fix one system, the real invasion moved under their feet. Human teams crawled through underground ducts, entered central control through water tunnels, and used soundproof pulse weapons to knock out guards silently. They weren't trying to kill, they were trying to take control without leaving a mark. Within 4 hours, the humans had full access to Varnak's main data towers. And from there, they did something unthinkable. They didn't just shut the grid down, they turned it against the Empire. Broadcasts meant to warn Trascan citizens about the human threat were hijacked and replaced with live footage from Earth, showing families, cities, and people not of war, but of peace, people who had been attacked without warning. Then came the most powerful message. A voice played across the galaxy. Human.com, strong. We do not seek domination, we seek justice. You struck our world unprovoked. Now your systems, your ships, your borders, belong to us. And across the Trascan Empire, systems began to fail, not because of a virus, but because humans understood the code now. They had watched, listened, stolen, and learned, and with every key they turned, they unlocked the Empire's own secrets, weapon plans, fleet routes, blackmail, files, corruption reports. Everything the Empire had hidden for centuries was now being leaked to the galaxy, and suddenly, the fear shifted, because the Trascans weren't just afraid of human soldiers now, they were afraid of their own people learning the truth. Back on Varnak, as panic grew and riots started in the streets, Rena stood inside the main data hall, staring at the glowing screen that showed thousands of Trascan citizens turning against their own leaders. Do we leave? One of her officers asked. No, she said. We've just started, now we go deeper. Because this was no longer about defense. This was a psychological war, and humans were winning it. Without firing a single missile, the galaxy watched in silence as Earth, once considered prey, now moved through enemy space like a predator, with perfect aim, tearing apart not just ships and walls, but beliefs, fear, and control. In less than a week, the Trascan Empire had lost 5 key communication worlds. No one saw the humans coming, and worst of all, no one knew where they would strike next. The Trascan Empire had always looked strong from the outside, with its tall spire cities, massive fleets, and proud rulers who declared that no enemy could ever reach their heart. But now, that heart had been touched, not with fire or weapons, but with something far more dangerous: truth. After Earth's attack on the communications world of Varnak, the secrets of the Empire were exposed like a wound. Every hidden lie, every dark decision, every betrayal made in silence was now floating through the galaxy's networks, playing on screens, spreading in whispers, reaching the very people the Empire had ruled for generations. And the worst part, the humans never claimed credit. They never said, "We did this." They let the Empire collapse under its own weight. Across Trascan space, entire colonies began to question why they were fighting Earth, why their leaders had started a war against a planet that had never even left its system until now. Protests started small, people asking for answers, soldiers refusing to attack. But then the Empire made its second great mistake. They responded with violence. They bombed one of their own cities, Lancor Prime, where thousands of Trascan citizens had gathered to protest peacefully. They called it a security measure, but everyone knew what it really was: fear. Fear. And fear, once felt, spreads fast. In less than 3 days, military officers began to go missing. Some went into hiding, some joined secret resistance groups, and some switched sides, because now, across the stars, a name was spreading, a name that once belonged only to a distant blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Earth. Not as prey, not as victims, but as a symbol of something new, force that had defied the impossible. Inside the deepest vaults of the Trascan Council, The surviving rulers sat in panic. They had lost almost 40% of their data systems, 22 military outposts, and more than half of their public trust. And still, no one could find the human fleet, because the humans weren't holding territory. They were moving like shadows, striking and vanishing, leaving messages instead of wreckage. And every time they acted, the Empire grew weaker from inside. In one secret meeting, Lord General Vorax, the last of the original War Council, slammed his hand on the table and roared, "Enough of this hiding. Call the final protocol." Gasps filled the room. The final protocol was never meant to be used. It was a forbidden plan, created long ago, that involved using a superweapon buried deep beneath Zarnik 7, a long-dead moon near the center of the Empire. It was not meant for battle. It was meant for extinction, an energy pulse so large it could wipe out the space around Earth, completely turning the planet and its surrounding systems into glass. "No more games," Vorax said. "No more chasing ghosts. We wipe them out in one strike." But what he didn't know was that humans were already listening, because one of the Trascan guards in the room wasn't a Trascan at all. He was human, masked, silent, watching. And the moment those words were spoken, Earth's High Command received the full recording. Back on Earth, deep inside the Arctic command bunker, Rena stood with her team as the footage played. She didn't blink. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she turned to her operations chief. "If they launch that weapon," she said slowly, "we lose everything." He nodded. "Do we try to stop the launch?" But Rena shook her head. "No," she said. "We don't stop it. We destroy the entire weapon." And with that, a new order was given. Infiltrate Zarnik 7. Stop the final protocol. But this time, it wouldn't be just sabotaged. It would be a message to the galaxy. If you threaten our world, you will lose yours. The humans had shown patience, precision, and control. Now, for the first time, they would show fury, because war wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was personal. It was survival. And if the Empire thought they had seen the full strength of humanity, they were about to learn what humans do when there is nothing left to lose. Zarnik 7 was a dead moon, forgotten by most, hidden behind thick asteroid fields and black star clouds, where even light took time to reach. But now, it was alive with danger, because deep under its surface, the Trascan Empire's darkest weapon had begun to awaken. It wasn't a gun, or a bomb, or a fleet. It was something older, something designed to erase, a massive energy core, connected to pulse drives, with a range wide enough to turn Earth and every nearby planet into lifeless rock. And the Trascan Council had chosen to activate it. They believed it was their last hope, their final answer, but they didn't know. Humans were already on ZARNAK-7. 2 days before the core activation. Rena had sent a special ops team 30 of Earth's best, trained not just in war, but in survival, silence, and sabotaged from stealth ships in the dead of night, wearing armor that bent light and heat, making them ghosts in the dark. Their mission was clear: find the core, destroy it, leave nothing behind. But it wouldn't be easy. The Trascans had filled the moon with defense bots, autoguns, and sensor webs. And worst of all, time was running out. Inside the core chamber, Lord General Vorax stood at the controls, his face marked with rage, not fear, as he watched the activation sequence count down. "Let them run," he growled. "Let them scream. We will remind the stars who rules them." But outside that room, something unexpected happened. The lights went out, one by one. The screens turned black. Security feeds showed only static. And the last thing Vorax heard before alarms began to scream was a soft voice on his comm. "We watched. We learned. Now we end it." The humans had arrived. They didn't charge in with loud weapons or heavy tanks. They moved like shadows, disabling traps, hacking walls, crawling through vents each step. Planned, each second measured, and by the time the Trascan guards realized what was happening, 5 of the 7 control towers were already in flames. Fighting exploded across the underground tunnels. Trascan soldiers, trained in brutal close combat, faced human warriors who didn't fight with anger, they fought with purpose. They didn't waste bullets. They didn't shout. They used silence like a blade. Every corner turned was a trap. Every hallway, a message. And slowly, the Trascan defense began to collapse. But just as the humans reached the final chamber, Vorax sealed himself inside with the weapons. Koran started the final override. "You can kill me," he shouted through the glass wall, "but the core will still fire." He was right. The system was locked. 10 minutes until detonation. Not just Earth, but several colonies would be lost. The humans had no time, no codes, no backup. And that's when Rena herself stepped forward. She had come with the team, not as a leader behind a desk, but as a soldier on the front lines, and when she saw the countdown, she made her decision. She turned to her engineer. "Can we stop the power loop?" He shook his head. "Only by detonating it manually from inside." That meant death. Whoever went in wasn't coming back. There was silence. Then Rena spoke. "Open the gate." The others tried to stop her, but she was already walking in. She entered the core, faced Vurax, and looked him in the eyes. "You thought this was about power," she said softly, "but it's always been about choice." And before he could answer, she hit the manual override, rerouting the energy into the moon's crust, turning the weapon's force inward instead of outward. The system screamed. The walls cracked. The chamber exploded in light. And then, silence. From orbit, Earth's ships watched as Zarnik 7 imploded, folding into itself in a final breath of fire, destroying the weapon, the base, and everything inside. Rena was gone, but so was the Empire's last hope. Back on Earth, the message came through. Mission complete. Zarnok neutralized. The war is over. Across the galaxy, the Trascan fleet surrendered. Worlds broke away from the Empire. Statues fell. People cheered. But on Earth, there was no celebration, only quiet respect, as Rena's name was carved into the black stone of the Martyr's Wall. Because, in the end, humans hadn't won with fire. They had won with courage, with sacrifice, with the one thing the Trascans had never understood, the human will to survive. And now, the stars belonged not to an empire of fear, but to a race that had once been preyed on and became legend.